The projector screen flickered to life, casting a ghostly blue glow across the wedding reception hall. In that instant, as the first photograph appeared, a damning image of my husband Robert with his arms wrapped around another woman, I watched as the color drained from her face. The woman who had brazenly sat in the front row during my son's ceremony, smiling like she belonged in our family portrait, suddenly swayed on her feet. Her champagne flute slipped from trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor as she collapsed in a dead faint. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here. My name is Nancy Patterson. I'm 65 years old, and I've called San Diego, California home for the past 40 years. For 38 of those years, I believed I was living the American dream with my husband Robert, a successful real estate developer, and our son David, who just graduated from medical school. I thought I knew everything about my life, my marriage, my family, my future. How devastatingly wrong I was. 3 months before David's wedding to his beautiful fiancée Sarah, I was the picture of a proud mother. I had spent the last 2 years meticulously planning every detail of what I envisioned would be the perfect celebration of love. From the hand-picked orchids that cost me $8,000 to the vintage champagne selection that set us back another $12,000. No expense was too great for my only child's special day. I had even dipped into my personal savings, money I'd been setting aside from my part-time work at the local art gallery, contributing an additional $25,000 to ensure David and Sarah had the wedding of their dreams. Robert seemed unusually involved in the guest arrangements, which initially warmed my heart. After years of him being consumed by his business dealings, seeing him take such an active interest in our son's wedding felt like a return to the man I fell in love with decades ago. He mentioned inviting a special friend, someone who had been incredibly supportive during a difficult business period. He described her as a family friend, someone who deserved to share in our joy. How naive I was to believe his lies. The woman's name was Victoria Sterling, and she was 38 years old, closer to my son's age than to mine. When she arrived at the wedding venue that morning, I was struck by her elegant appearance and confident demeanor. She wore a stunning emerald dress that perfectly complemented her auburn hair, and she carried herself with the poise of someone accustomed to fine things. Robert introduced her to various guests with such familiarity that I began to feel uncomfortable, though I couldn't quite put my finger on why. During the ceremony, I noticed how she dabbed at her eyes during the vows, how she smiled knowingly when David spoke about the importance of honesty and trust in marriage. She applauded with genuine enthusiasm when the couple kissed, and she even helped herself to tissues from my purse when the emotional weight of the moment seemed to overwhelm her. At the time, I found her emotion touching, a sign of someone who truly understood the sanctity of marriage. If only I had known she was crying because she was watching my husband's son marry while she had been sharing my husband's bed for over 2 years. The revelation came just 1 week before the wedding, and it came from the most unexpected source, my own investigation. Something about Victoria's presence and Robert's secretive phone calls had been gnawing at me. Call it women's intuition, or simply the survival instinct of a wife who had noticed her husband's increasing emotional distance. But I hired a private investigator named Marcus Chen. For $2,500, he provided me with a file that shattered my world and simultaneously armed me with the power to reclaim it. So there I stood at my son's wedding reception, my carefully planned surprise ready to unfold. As Victoria lay unconscious on the floor, the room fell silent, except for the gentle hum of the projector, which continued displaying the evidence of my husband's betrayal for all our family and friends to see. If you're watching this story unfold and you're as shocked as I was, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories. I'd love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Leave a comment below and let me know. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next in this tale of betrayal, revenge, and ultimate justice. The chaos that erupted in the moments after Victoria's collapse was unlike anything I had ever witnessed. David rushed to my side, his medical training kicking in as he tried to assess the situation. Sarah stood frozen in her wedding dress, her bouquet of white roses trembling in her grasp as she stared at the images rotating on the screen behind me. Robert, meanwhile, had gone completely pale, his hands shaking as he fumbled with his phone, desperately trying to call someone, probably his lawyer. "Mom, what is this?" David's voice cracked with confusion and hurt as he looked from the screen to me, then to his father. The projector continued its damning slideshow. Robert and Victoria at a romantic dinner in La Jolla. Robert and Victoria entering a hotel in downtown San Diego. Robert and Victoria shopping for jewelry at Tiffany & Co., the same store where he had supposedly bought me an anniversary gift just 6 months earlier. As the wedding guests murmured in shocked whispers, I maintained my composure with a grace I didn't know I possessed. This, my dear son, is the truth about your father's special friend. My voice carried clearly across the stunned reception hall. The woman who fainted is Victoria Sterling, and she has been having an affair with your father for over 2 years. Victoria was beginning to regain consciousness, helped by Sarah's concerned bridesmaid, who happened to be a nurse. As she sat up slowly, her eyes immediately found the screen, and fresh horror washed over her face as she realized her secret was on full display for over 200 wedding guests. Robert finally found his voice, though it came out as a strangled whisper. "Nancy, please, not here, not at David's wedding." "Not here?" I laughed, a sound that surprised even me with its bitter edge. "You mean not at the wedding where you brought your mistress as your guest? Not at the celebration I planned and partially funded with my own savings while you were spending God knows how much money on hotels and jewelry for her?" The private investigator's report had been thorough and devastating. Robert had been charging romantic getaways to his business credit card, $15,000 for a weekend in Napa Valley, $8,000 for a stay at the Del Coronado, countless dinner receipts totaling over $20,000. He had purchased Victoria a diamond bracelet worth $18,000 and had been paying for her luxury apartment lease at $4,500 per month. While I had been carefully budgeting and contributing my gallery earnings to our son's wedding, Robert had been lavishing gifts on his mistress with money from our joint accounts. "David, Sarah, I am so deeply sorry that your special day has been overshadowed by this revelation," I continued, addressing the young couple directly. "But I couldn't let this charade continue for one more day. You both deserve to start your marriage with honesty as your foundation, something your father apparently never learned." Victoria had managed to stand, supported by the nurse bridesmaid, and she was frantically searching for an exit. Her emerald dress, which had looked so sophisticated earlier, now seemed like a costume in a play where she had been caught performing the wrong role. She avoided eye contact with everyone as she pushed through the crowd of confused and scandalized guests. "Victoria, wait!" Robert called out, taking a step toward her, which proved to be his biggest mistake of the evening. The collective gasp from the wedding guests was audible. By calling after his mistress instead of trying to salvage things with his wife and son, Robert had just confirmed everything I had revealed. David's face went from confused to absolutely furious in the span of seconds. "Dad, did you just choose her over Mom? Over our family? At my wedding?" David's voice rose with each word, his medical composure completely abandoned. Sarah stepped forward, her wedding dress rustling as she moved to stand beside her new mother-in-law. "Mrs. Patterson, I can't imagine how much courage it took to do this. Thank you for being honest with us." The room was dividing into clear factions, those who were rallying around me in support and those who were simply trying to escape the uncomfortable drama. Robert's business associates were making hasty exits, while my friends and family members were moving closer, creating a protective circle around David, Sarah, and me. My sister Margaret, who had flown in from Chicago for the wedding, approached with tears in her eyes. "Nancy, honey, how long have you known?" "1 week," I replied, my voice steady despite the emotional tornado raging inside me. 1 week of planning this moment, 1 week of deciding whether to let my son's wedding be a celebration built on lies or to give him the gift of truth. Robert was now standing alone in the middle of the dance floor, Victoria having successfully escaped through a side exit. The man who had commanded rooms full of investors and closed million-dollar deals looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The projector finally cycled to its last image, a photograph of Robert and Victoria at what appeared to be a jewelry store, with her trying on what looked suspiciously like an engagement ring. 38 years, Robert," I said, loud enough for him and everyone else to hear. 38 years I gave you, and this is how you repay not just me, but our son on the most important day of his life." As the implications of that final photograph sank in around the room, I realized that my husband's betrayal ran even deeper than I had initially discovered. This wasn't just an affair. This was a man planning to leave his family entirely. The wedding reception that was supposed to celebrate love had transformed into a courtroom where my marriage was on trial, and the evidence was overwhelmingly damning. As guests began to filter out, some offering hurried congratulations to David and Sarah, others stopping to express their support for me, I felt a strange mixture of liberation and devastation. Robert approached me cautiously, his earlier panic replaced by what appeared to be resignation. "Nancy, we need to talk. Privately." "Privately?" I repeated, gesturing toward the nearly empty reception hall. "After 38 years of marriage, you want to have a private conversation now? After you've humiliated me in front of our family and friends? After you brought your mistress to our son's wedding?" David had been quietly conferring with Sarah near the head table, and now he walked over to join us, his face a mask of barely controlled anger. "Dad, I think you've said enough for one evening." "Mom, are you okay? Do you want us to drive you home?" The concern in my son's voice broke something loose inside me, and for the first time that evening, I felt tears threatening to spill over. But I forced them back. I had cried enough over Robert's betrayal during the past week. Tonight was about strength and truth, not tears. "Thank you, sweetheart, but I have my own car. I think your father and I do need to have that conversation, but not here, not at your wedding venue." I turned to Robert with a look that could have frozen the San Diego Bay. "Your things will be packed and waiting on the front porch when you get home. I've already changed the locks." Robert's eyes widened in surprise. "You can't just kick me out of my own house, Nancy." "Your house?" I laughed again, that same bitter sound from earlier. "The house that I've been making mortgage payments on from my gallery job for the past 3 years, while you were spending our money on your girlfriend? The house where I've been the only one actually living for the past 6 months, while you've been staying out late at the office 4 nights a week." This was another piece of information that Marcus Chen's investigation had revealed. Robert had essentially moved out already, spending most nights at Victoria's apartment. I had been so focused on wedding planning and my part-time work that I hadn't fully processed how alone I had been in our home. The $4,500 monthly rent he was paying for Victoria's luxury apartment made perfect sense now. He had essentially established a second residence. "Mom," David interjected gently, "maybe we should talk about this tomorrow. It's been a long day, and you've been through enough." Sarah stepped forward, still in her beautiful wedding dress, but now looking more like a protective daughter than a bride. "Mrs. Patterson, would you like to stay with us tonight? We're not leaving for our honeymoon until Wednesday." The kindness in her offer nearly undid my composure entirely. Here was my new daughter-in-law, on her wedding night, offering comfort to me when she should be celebrating with her husband. It struck me that Robert's betrayal hadn't just damaged our marriage, it had stolen joy from David and Sarah's perfect day. "That's very sweet of you both, but I'll be fine at home. I've been preparing for this conversation all week." I reached into my purse and pulled out a thick manila envelope. "Robert, this contains copies of everything my private investigator found. Bank statements showing the money you've spent on Victoria, photographs documenting your affair, and a detailed timeline of your deception. My lawyer has the originals." Robert stared at the envelope like it might bite him. "Your lawyer? Did you think I would discover a 2-year affair and not seek legal counsel? Patricia Morrison has been reviewing our finances all week. We have quite a lot to discuss regarding asset division, spousal support, and the fact that you've been essentially stealing from our joint accounts to fund your relationship with Victoria." Patricia Morrison was known as one of the most formidable divorce attorneys in San Diego. She had cost me $5,000 just for the initial consultation and document review, but the investment was already proving worthwhile. According to Patricia, California's community property laws meant that every dollar Robert had spent on Victoria, the hotels, dinners, jewelry, and rent, was technically my money too. The remaining wedding guests were pretending not to eavesdrop, but I could see heads turning in our direction. Robert's business partner, Jim Crawford, was still nursing a whiskey at the bar, and I could tell he was absorbing every word of our conversation. Jim had always been respectful to me at company events, and I wondered how much he had known about Robert's double life. "You've really thought this through," Robert said quietly, and for the first time that evening, he sounded defeated rather than angry or defensive. "I had a week to think, Robert, a week to process the fact that my husband of 38 years has been living a lie. A week to realize that while I was worrying about making our son's wedding perfect, you were planning to leave me for a woman almost young enough to be our daughter. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it and couldn't help but smile grimly. Well, this is interesting. That was Marcus Chen, my private investigator. It seems Victoria has just checked into the Hotel del Coronado under her own name. The same hotel where you took her for your romantic weekend getaway last spring. Robert's face went white again. How could you possibly know that? Because I know everything, Robert. Every lie, every secret meeting, every dollar you spent on her. And starting tomorrow, my lawyer and I are going to make sure you pay for every single one of them. The morning after the wedding disaster, I woke up in my empty house, truly empty for the first time in decades. Robert's belongings sat in neat boxes on the front porch, just as I had promised. I had spent the previous week methodically packing his clothes, personal items, and removing every trace of his presence from what was now solely my sanctuary. The locksmith had arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, and by 8 a.m., my home was completely secure from any unwanted intrusions. Patricia Morrison had scheduled an emergency meeting for 9 a.m., despite it being a Sunday. Her law office in downtown San Diego overlooked the harbor, and as I sat in her leather chair reviewing documents, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. "Nancy, what you've uncovered here is quite substantial," Patricia said, spreading bank statements across her mahogany desk. "Robert has spent approximately $125,000 on this affair over the past 2 years. The hotel stays, restaurant bills, jewelry purchases, and apartment rent payments are all well documented. In California, this constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty to the community. The numbers were staggering when laid out in black and white. $125,000 that should have gone toward our retirement, our son's future, or simply remained in our joint savings. Instead, it had funded Robert's midlife crisis and his mistress's luxurious lifestyle. What does that mean for me practically? I asked, though Patricia had already explained it during our initial consultation. It means Robert owes the community, essentially you, $125,000 plus interest. When we divide assets in the divorce proceedings, you'll be entitled to reimbursement for every penny he spent on Victoria. Additionally, his secretive behavior and financial deception strengthen your case for spousal support. My phone rang, interrupting our discussion. The caller ID showed David's number. "Mom, are you okay? Sarah and I have been worried about you all night." "I'm fine, sweetheart. I'm actually at my lawyer's office right now, getting everything in order." "Good. Listen, Dad showed up at our hotel this morning. He's asking if we'll talk to you on his behalf. Try to work something out privately." I looked at Patricia, who was shaking her head emphatically. "David, honey, your father had 38 years to work things out privately. He chose to work things out with Victoria instead. Tell him if he wants to communicate with me, he can have his lawyer call mine. He says he doesn't have a lawyer yet. Then he better get one. And David, thank you for checking on me, but please don't let your father's problems interfere with your honeymoon. You and Sarah deserve to celebrate your marriage without this drama." After I hung up, Patricia leaned forward with a serious expression. "Nancy, you need to be prepared for Robert to fight back. Men like him, successful, used to being in control, they don't go quietly. He's going to try everything he can think of to minimize his financial responsibility." She was right. By Tuesday afternoon, I received a call from Robert's newly hired attorney, Marcus Webb, a lawyer known for his aggressive tactics in high-asset divorce cases. Webb's retainer alone was probably $25,000, money that was coming out of our joint accounts, just like everything else Robert had been spending. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Marcus Webb representing your husband. I think we can resolve this matter amicably without the need for lengthy litigation. Mr. Webb, all communication regarding my divorce should go through my attorney, Patricia Morrison." "Of course, but I thought you might appreciate knowing that Mr. Patterson is prepared to offer you a generous settlement package." The audacity was breathtaking. "Generous? Let me understand this correctly. My husband has an affair, spends over $100,000 on his mistress, brings her to our son's wedding, and now he's offering me a generous settlement of my own money? Mrs. Patterson, emotions are running high right now, but Mr. Webb, the only thing running high right now is my resolve to ensure your client pays for every dollar he stole from our marriage to fund his affair. Good day." I hung up and immediately called Patricia to report the conversation. She laughed when I told her about the generous settlement offer. They're testing the waters, seeing if you'll accept less than you're entitled to. This tells me they're worried about how much evidence you have. That evening, as I was reviewing financial documents in my home office, I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Robert's BMW, and my heart rate spiked. He didn't have keys anymore, but that didn't stop him from walking up to the front door and ringing the bell repeatedly. "Nancy, please, we need to talk. I know I messed up, but we can work this out." I spoke through the closed door. "Robert, you need to leave. All communication goes through our lawyers now." "This is ridiculous. It's my house too." "Actually, according to the deed Patricia reviewed, this house is in my name only. I purchased it with money from my inheritance when my mother died 5 years ago. You have no legal right to be here." This was another crucial detail that Marcus Chen's investigation had uncovered. When I inherited $300,000 from my mother's estate, I had used it as a down payment on our current home, carefully keeping the property in my sole name. At the time, Robert had praised my business sense. Now it was my lifeline. The silence from outside stretched for several minutes before I heard his car door slam and the engine start. As his taillights disappeared down the street, I felt a mixture of sadness and fierce determination. The man I had loved for nearly 4 decades was truly gone, but I was discovering a strength I never knew I possessed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over, Nancy. I built a life with Robert, and I'm not giving up without a fight. Victoria." I screenshotted the message and forwarded it to Patricia immediately. If Victoria Sterling wanted a fight, she was about to learn that she had picked the wrong woman to threaten. The text message from Victoria marked the beginning of what Patricia called intimidation tactics. Over the next few days, I received multiple messages from unknown numbers, some claiming to be friends of Victoria's, others making vague threats about destroying my reputation if I didn't back off. Each message was carefully documented and forwarded to both Patricia and the police, who opened a harassment file under case number 2024 SD 7738. What Victoria and her supporters didn't anticipate was that their campaign of intimidation would backfire spectacularly. By Thursday morning, I had received calls from 3 different people who had information about Robert and Victoria's relationship that went far beyond what Marcus Chen had uncovered. The first call came from Jennifer Walsh, a woman I had never met but who claimed to work at the luxury spa where Victoria was a regular client. "Mrs. Patterson, I saw the news coverage of what happened at your son's wedding, and I had to call you. Victoria Sterling has been bragging for months about how she was going to be Mrs. Robert Patterson soon. She showed off an engagement ring and everything. This confirmed what I had suspected from that final photograph in my presentation. Robert hadn't just been having an affair. He had been planning to marry Victoria, presumably after divorcing me. The second call was even more shocking. It came from Robert's business partner Jim Crawford, whom I had noticed at the wedding reception. "Nancy, I owe you an apology. I've known about Robert's affair for over a year, and I should have told you. I thought it was a midlife crisis phase that would burn out, but when I saw him bring that woman to David's wedding, I realized how serious he was about destroying his family." Jim's information was invaluable. As Robert's business partner, he had intimate knowledge of their company's finances and could testify that Robert had been using business funds to support his affair. According to Jim, Robert had charged personal expenses to their company credit card and had even used company time to meet with Victoria, sometimes taking business lunches that lasted entire afternoons. "Nancy, there's something else. Victoria has been pressuring Robert to force you out of the house so she could move in. She's been planning their future together down to the last detail, including redecorating your home and getting rid of what she called Nancy's old lady furniture." The third call was the most unexpected of all. It came from Victoria's own sister, a woman named Linda Sterling who lived in Phoenix. "Mrs. Patterson, I saw the video someone posted online of what happened at the wedding, and I had to reach out to you. My sister has done this before. She breaks up marriages, takes whatever money she can get, and then moves on to the next victim. You're not her first target, and Robert isn't her first married man." Linda's information painted Victoria as a serial predator who specifically targeted wealthy older men in committed relationships. She had destroyed 2 previous marriages in Phoenix and had moved to San Diego specifically to find new victims. "She studies these men, Mrs. Patterson. She learns about their hobbies, their businesses, their family situations, and then she becomes exactly what they think they want. With Robert, she probably researched real estate development and became interested in architecture or interior design. Am I right? The accuracy of Linda's assessment was chilling. Robert had mentioned Victoria's keen eye for design and her understanding of the real estate market multiple times. I had assumed she was simply an intelligent woman with diverse interests. In reality, she had been playing a carefully calculated role. Patricia was fascinated by these developments when I briefed her on Friday morning. "Nancy, this changes everything. If we can prove Victoria has a pattern of targeting married men for financial gain, we can potentially pursue criminal charges for fraud, and we can definitely strengthen your case for maximum asset recovery." Armed with this new information, Patricia filed additional motions requesting a forensic accounting of all business expenses and a comprehensive review of Robert's personal spending patterns dating back 3 years instead of the original 2. She also requested that Victoria be deposed under oath about her relationship with Robert and her knowledge of his marital status. Robert's response was swift and panicked. Marcus Webb called Patricia's office that same afternoon with a new settlement offer. Robert would give me 75% of all marital assets, assume all debts, and pay spousal support of $8,000 per month for 5 years. "He's scared," Patricia explained. "The forensic accounting alone could uncover business fraud, which would expose Robert to criminal charges. He wants to settle before we dig too deep, but I wasn't ready to settle." The more I learned about the scope of Robert's deception and Victoria's manipulation, the more determined I became to expose the full truth. They had both underestimated me, assuming I would be a grieving, helpless wife who would quietly accept whatever scraps they offered. That evening, as I sat in my garden enjoying the peace of my Victoria-free, Robert-free home, I received a call from David. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I want you to know that Sarah and I are completely on your side. We've decided to postpone our honeymoon so I can help you through this." "Absolutely not," I replied firmly. "You and Sarah are going to Tuscany as planned. Your marriage is just beginning, and I won't let your father's mistakes steal one more moment of joy from you." "But Mom, you shouldn't have to face this alone." "Sweetheart, I'm not alone. I have an excellent lawyer, I have the truth on my side, and I have a strength I never knew I possessed. Your father and his girlfriend picked the wrong woman to underestimate." As I spoke those words, I realized they were completely true. For the first time in decades, I felt powerful and in control of my own destiny. Robert and Victoria had inadvertently given me the greatest gift possible. They had shown me who I really was when my back was against the wall. The deposition was scheduled for the following Wednesday at Patricia's law office. Victoria arrived with her own attorney, a nervous-looking young man named Bradley Chen, who appeared to be fresh out of law school. The contrast between Patricia's experienced confidence and Bradley's obvious anxiety told me everything I needed to know about how seriously Victoria was taking this legal proceeding. Under oath, Victoria was required to answer questions about her relationship with Robert, her knowledge of his marital status, and her financial arrangements with him. What emerged during the 3-hour deposition was even more damaging than I had anticipated. "Ms. Sterling," Patricia began, "when did you first learn that Robert Patterson was married?" "I learned he was married during our first conversation," Victoria admitted, shifting uncomfortably in her chair. "And that first conversation took place where?" "At a charity auction for the Children's Hospital Foundation in La Jolla. It was in November, 2 years ago." Patricia consulted her notes. "The same charity auction that Mrs. Patterson was supposed to attend with her husband, but couldn't because she was recovering from pneumonia." Victoria's face flushed. I don't know anything about that, but I did. I remembered that night perfectly. Robert had insisted on attending the auction alone, claiming it was important for business networking. I had been disappointed to miss it, as the Children's Hospital was one of my favorite charities. I had even helped organize the event committee earlier that year. "Ms. Sterling, did Mr. Patterson tell you he was unhappily married? He said his marriage had been over for years in all but name. Did he mention that he and his wife had just celebrated their 36th wedding anniversary 2 months before you met him?" Victoria's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. She had no answer for the fact that Robert had been lying to both of us from the very beginning. Patricia continued methodically through the timeline, establishing that Victoria had known from the start that Robert was married and had actively participated in deceiving me. The most damaging revelation came when Patricia asked about the engagement ring. "Miss Sterling, have you and Mr. Patterson discussed marriage?" Victoria's composure finally cracked. "Yes, but only after he told me he was filing for divorce." "When did he tell you he was filing for divorce?" "Last month." "Last month?" Patricia repeated for emphasis. 1 month before his son's wedding, where he brought you as his guest while still married to Mrs. Patterson?" The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Robert had been promising Victoria marriage while simultaneously planning to bring her to our son's wedding as if she were already part of the family. The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity, but Patricia wasn't finished. "Miss Sterling, what is your current employment status?" I'm between jobs right now." "How long have you been between jobs?" "About 18 months. "So for the past 18 months, how have you been supporting yourself financially?" Bradley Chen tried to object, but Patricia pressed forward. "Ms. Sterling, isn't it true that Robert Patterson has been paying your rent, buying your clothing, paying for your car lease, and providing you with spending money?" "Robert is generous, but Ms. Sterling, isn't it true that you haven't had any source of income other than Robert Patterson's financial support for the past year and a half?" Victoria's silence was answer enough. Patricia had established that Victoria had essentially been a kept woman, completely financially dependent on Robert while he was still married to me. After the deposition, Patricia and I reviewed the transcript over dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown. The legal implications were staggering. "Nancy, this deposition alone gives us grounds to argue that Robert was supporting Victoria as if she were a second wife while still married to you. In California, that's considered a breach of fiduciary duty to the community property." "What does that mean in terms of dollars?" "It means we can argue that every penny he spent supporting Victoria should be returned to you, plus punitive damages. We're not just talking about the $125,000 we originally calculated. We're talking about potentially $200,000 or more." That evening, I received an unexpected phone call from Robert himself. "Nancy, we need to talk. Victoria's lawyer is telling her she should consider throwing me under the bus to save herself." "Robert, you threw yourself under the bus the moment you decided to cheat on your wife and bring your mistress to your son's wedding. I made mistakes, I know that. But Nancy, we can still work this out between us. We don't need lawyers tearing apart everything we built together." "Everything we built together?" I laughed. "Robert, you destroyed everything we built together when you decided to build a new life with Victoria. The lawyers are just documenting the wreckage. The business, Nancy. Think about the business. If this goes to trial, Jim Crawford is going to testify about the company credit cards, the business trips that weren't really business trips. The company could be destroyed." For the first time since this nightmare began, Robert sounded genuinely worried about something other than his own comfort. His real estate development company was worth several $1,000,000, and if it came out that he had been using business funds for personal affairs, the legal ramifications could extend far beyond our divorce. "That's not my problem anymore, Robert. You should have thought about the business before you decided to use company resources to support your mistress." "Nancy, please. What do you want? I'll give you whatever you want, but we need to settle this before it destroys everything." "What I want, Robert, is for you to face the consequences of your choices. What I want is for Victoria to realize that breaking up families has a price. What I want is for our son to see that his mother isn't someone who can be discarded and humiliated without consequence. So this is about revenge. No, Robert, this is about justice." As I hung up the phone, I realized that my victory was already more complete than I had imagined possible. Robert wasn't just facing the loss of his marriage. He was facing the potential destruction of his business, his reputation, and his financial security. Victoria wasn't just losing her meal ticket. She was facing the possibility of legal consequences for her role in defrauding our marriage. For 38 years, I had been the supportive wife, the understanding partner, the woman who put everyone else's needs before her own. But those days were over. Nancy Patterson was finally fighting for herself, and she was winning. The momentum shift in my favor became undeniable when Robert's business partner, Jim Crawford, decided to take action against the company's financial irregularities. On Monday morning, Jim filed a formal complaint with their business insurance company and requested a complete audit of all company expenditures for the past 3 years. Patricia called me with the update around noon. "Nancy, This is huge. Jim Crawford's complaint means that Robert's misuse of company funds is now a matter of corporate insurance fraud, not just personal misconduct. The insurance company is freezing all business assets pending the investigation. What does that mean for Robert? It means he can't access company funds to pay for his expensive divorce lawyer or to continue supporting Victoria. His primary source of income just got shut down. The irony was perfect. Robert's affair had led to the destruction of the business he had spent decades building. By Wednesday afternoon, Marcus Webb filed a motion to withdraw as Robert's counsel due to unpaid legal fees. Robert was forced to represent himself or find a cheaper attorney, a humiliating fall from his position of power and control. Victoria's situation was even more desperate. Without Robert's financial support, she couldn't afford her luxury apartment rent or her high-end lifestyle. According to Linda Sterling, who had been keeping me updated on her sister's situation, Victoria had been frantically calling old contacts in Phoenix, trying to find her next target. But the most satisfying development came on Friday morning, when I received a call from Detective Maria Rodriguez of the San Diego Police Department. "Mrs. Patterson, we've completed our investigation of the harassment complaints you filed against Victoria Sterling. We found evidence that she orchestrated the threatening messages you received using prepaid phones and fake accounts. We're issuing a warrant for her arrest on charges of criminal harassment and cyberstalking." The threatening text messages that were supposed to intimidate me had become evidence in a criminal case. Victoria's attempt to scare me into backing down had backfired spectacularly. That afternoon, as I was tending to my garden, I saw David and Sarah walking up my driveway. They had returned early from their honeymoon and both looked tanned and happy despite everything that had happened. "Mom, we heard about Dad's business troubles," David said as he hugged me. "Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay, sweetheart. I'm finally free." Sarah handed me a small wrapped gift. "We brought you something from Tuscany." Inside the elegant box was a beautiful hand-blown glass ornament shaped like a phoenix rising from flames. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of us. "The woman at the shop said it represents rebirth and new beginnings," Sarah explained. "She said it was perfect for strong women who rise above their challenges." As the three of us sat on my patio sharing stories from their honeymoon and updates on the legal proceedings, I felt a contentment I hadn't experienced in years. My marriage was over, but my relationship with my son had actually grown stronger through this crisis. Sarah had become not just a daughter-in-law, but a true ally and friend. "Mom," David said during a quiet moment, "I need to tell you something. Sarah and I have been talking, and we want to invest in your art gallery." I was speechless. My part-time job at the gallery had always been more passion than profit, but it was something I loved deeply. "The owner mentioned she's thinking about retiring," Sarah added. "We think you should buy the gallery and make it your own. You've always had incredible taste in art, and you deserve to have something that's completely yours." The gallery had been for sale for $150,000, exactly the amount that Patricia calculated Robert owed me from his affair-related expenses. The poetic justice was overwhelming. "We've already talked to the bank," David continued. "With the settlement money from Dad and our contribution as investors, you could own the gallery outright with no debt." That evening, after David and Sarah had gone home to their apartment, I sat in my living room surrounded by the financial documents that told the story of my marriage's demise and my personal renaissance. The forensic accounting had revealed that Robert had actually spent closer to $185,000 on Victoria over the past 2 years, money that would be returned to me with interest. My phone rang, and I was surprised to see Robert's name on the caller ID. "Nancy, I heard about the criminal charges against Victoria. Did you call to gloat? To say I told you so?" "No, I called to apologize. Really apologize. I've lost everything. The business, Victoria, my relationship with David, our marriage. I've been thinking a lot about what you said about consequences." For a moment, Robert sounded like the man I had married decades ago. Vulnerable, honest, remorseful. But the moment passed quickly. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued, "but I want you to know that you were right about everything. Victoria was using me, and I was too proud and too foolish to see it. I destroyed our family for someone who never cared about me at all. Robert, I appreciate the apology, but it doesn't change anything. You made your choices, and now we both have to live with the consequences. I know. I hope someday you can remember the good times we had before I ruined everything." After I hung up, I did think about the good times. There had been many. Raising David, building careers, creating a life together. But those memories belonged to a different Nancy. A woman who had defined herself through her relationships with others rather than her own strength and independence. The new Nancy Patterson was just getting started. The day of Victoria Sterling's arrest became a turning point that exceeded even my highest expectations for justice. Detective Rodriguez called me at 7 a.m. to inform me that Victoria had been taken into custody at the Del Coronado Hotel, where she had been staying since fleeing our confrontation at the wedding. Mrs. Patterson, you might be interested to know that when we arrested Ms. Sterling, she was meeting with another married man, a wealthy widower from La Jolla whose wife passed away just 6 months ago. She had already established a pattern of manipulation with him remarkably similar to what she did with your husband. The arrest made the local news, and the story of the wedding confrontation went viral on social media. My daughter-in-law, Sarah, showed me the video that someone had posted online. Apparently, a wedding guest had filmed the entire projector presentation. The video had been viewed over 2 million times, with thousands of comments supporting my decision to expose the truth. Patricia called with updates throughout the morning. Nancy, Victoria's arrest has prompted Robert's new attorney to reach out about settling immediately. They're offering you 90% of all marital assets, the house free and clear, full spousal support for 7 years, and reimbursement for all legal fees. And Robert gets what in return? Essentially, he gets to avoid criminal charges for business fraud and keeps his freedom. Jim Crawford has agreed not to press charges if Robert signs over his share of the business and makes full restitution. It was more than I had dared hope for. Robert would lose everything he had spent decades building, while I would emerge financially secure and completely independent. But the money wasn't the real victory. The real victory was proving that Nancy Patterson was not a woman to be underestimated or discarded. That afternoon, I drove to the art gallery where I had worked part-time for the past 5 years. Margaret Chen, the owner, was waiting for me with a bottle of champagne and the sales contract for the gallery. Nancy, I've been following your story in the news, and I couldn't be prouder of how you've handled everything. This gallery needs someone with your strength and vision. As I signed the papers to become the sole owner of Patterson Fine Arts Gallery, yes, I was keeping my married name for business purposes. I felt a rush of excitement I hadn't experienced since David was born. At 65, I was starting a completely new chapter of my life. David and Sarah arrived just as Margaret and I were toasting the sale. They brought with them a surprise that brought tears to my eyes, a custom-made sign for the gallery that read, Patterson Fine Arts Gallery, featuring works by emerging and established artists, founded 2024 by Nancy Patterson, proprietor. Mom, we wanted you to have something that was completely yours, David said as he hugged me. No shared ownership, no compromise, no one else's name on the title, just yours. That evening, I hosted my first dinner party in months. David and Sarah joined me, along with my sister Margaret, who had decided to extend her visit, and surprisingly, Jim Crawford, who had become an unexpected ally throughout this ordeal. Nancy, Jim said as we enjoyed wine on the patio, I owe you a debt of gratitude. If you hadn't exposed Robert's behavior, I never would have discovered the extent of his fraud against our business. In a strange way, your courage saved my financial future too. Jim's investigation had revealed that Robert had been embezzling from their company for nearly 3 years, not just the 2 years of his affair with Victoria. The total amount approached $400,000, money that would have eventually bankrupted their partnership and destroyed Jim's life's work. Where is Robert now? Margaret asked. He's renting a studio apartment in Chula Vista, Jim answered. He took a job as a junior sales agent with a small real estate company. His new boss doesn't know about the scandal yet, but in this town, word travels fast. The image of Robert, once a successful business owner who commanded respect in San Diego's real estate community, now working as a junior salesman in a tiny apartment, was sobering. I felt no joy in his downfall, but I felt no sympathy either. He had chosen his path. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, and for a moment I worried it might be another harassment message. Instead, it was from Linda Sterling, Victoria's sister. Mrs. Patterson, I wanted you to know that Victoria pled guilty today to avoid jail time. She's been sentenced to 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory psychological counseling. She's also banned from contacting you or your family. Thank you for stopping her before she could destroy another family. As I shared this update with my dinner companions, I realized that my story had become bigger than just personal revenge. By standing up to Robert and Victoria, I had potentially saved other families from similar devastation. The wealthy widower Victoria had been targeting was now free to grieve his wife without being manipulated by a predator. "You know what the best part of all this is?" Sarah asked as we cleared the dinner dishes. "What's that, sweetheart? You're not just surviving this, you're thriving. You're happier now than you were when we first met." She was absolutely right. For the first time in decades, I was living completely for myself, making decisions based on what I wanted, rather than what was expected of me. The weight of pretending to be happy in an unfulfilling marriage was gone, replaced by the lightness of authentic independence. As my guests prepared to leave, David pulled me aside. "Mom, I'm proud of you. What you did took incredible courage, and you've handled everything with such grace and strength. I hope if I'm ever faced with a situation like this, I can be half as brave as you were." "You'll be braver, sweetheart. That's what each generation is supposed to do. Be better than the one before." 6 months after the wedding disaster that changed my life forever, I stood in my newly renovated art gallery, preparing for our grand reopening celebration. The space had been transformed from a quaint neighborhood gallery into a sophisticated showcase for both established and emerging artists. The insurance settlement from Robert's fraud case, combined with my divorce settlement, had allowed me to expand the gallery and create something truly special. The guest list for tonight's reopening included many of the same people who had witnessed my public revelation at David's wedding. But tonight, they would see a very different Nancy Patterson, confident, successful, and completely in control of her destiny. Patricia Morrison arrived early, bringing with her a bottle of Dom Perignon and a legal document I had been waiting months to sign. "Nancy, this is the final decree absolute," she announced with satisfaction. "As of today, you are officially divorced and free to begin your new life without any legal ties to Robert." The divorce settlement had been even more generous than we had initially negotiated. Robert, desperate to avoid criminal prosecution and public humiliation, had agreed to give me 95% of our marital assets, including retirement accounts, investment properties, and his classic car collection. He had also agreed to pay spousal support of $10,000 per month for 10 years, ensuring my financial security well into the future. And the business restitution? Completed last week. Jim Crawford confirmed that Robert has paid back every penny he embezzled, plus interest and penalties. The business is now solely owned by Jim, and it's thriving without Robert's toxic influence. As guests began arriving for the gallery opening, I was struck by how many people had rallied to support my new venture. My sister Margaret had moved to San Diego permanently to help manage the gallery. David and Sarah had invested in the business and frequently brought their medical colleagues to view our collections. Even some of Robert's former business associates had become gallery patrons, apparently eager to distance themselves from his scandal while supporting his ex-wife's success. The evening's featured artist was a young woman named Elena Rodriguez, whose paintings explored themes of transformation and personal empowerment. Her work had spoken to me immediately when I discovered her in a small coffee shop gallery downtown. "Mrs. Patterson," Elena said as we stood before her centerpiece painting, a phoenix rising from colorful flames. "When I heard your story, I knew I had to feature this piece tonight. You've become a real-life phoenix, rising stronger from the ashes of your old life." The metaphor was perfect, and as I looked around the gallery at the friends, family, and new clients who had come to celebrate with me, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment that went far beyond financial success. Detective Rodriguez arrived with her partner, both in civilian clothes. They had become friends during the investigation into Victoria's harassment campaign and had been following my journey with interest. "Nancy, we have an update you might find satisfying," Detective Rodriguez said quietly. "Victoria Sterling violated her probation terms last month. She was caught attempting to contact another married man she met through an online dating app. She's now serving 6 months in county jail. The pattern of predatory behavior had continued, even after her conviction, proving that my decision to expose her had been absolutely necessary. How many other families might she have destroyed if her behavior had remained hidden? Jim Crawford arrived with his new business partner, a sharp young woman named Susan Kim, who had transformed their company culture completely. "Nancy, "I brought contracts for 3 new commercial art installations," Jim announced. "Our clients specifically requested pieces from Patterson Fine Arts Gallery." The business referrals from Jim's company had become a significant source of revenue for the gallery. In 6 months, we had increased sales by 400% and had established relationships with collectors throughout Southern California. As the evening progressed, I found myself in conversation with Margaret Chen, the gallery's former owner, who had become something of a mentor to me in the art business. "Nancy, I have to ask, do you ever regret the dramatic way you handled the wedding confrontation? Some people think you should have handled it more privately." The question gave me pause. In quieter moments, I had wondered if there had been a gentler way to reveal Robert's betrayal. But as I looked around the gallery at the life I had built from the ashes of my marriage, I knew I had made the right choice. "Margaret, if I had handled it privately, Robert would have controlled the narrative. He would have made me the villain, the bitter ex-wife who couldn't accept his happiness. By exposing the truth publicly, I took control of my own story. And Victoria? Victoria would have moved on to destroy another family. Now she's facing consequences for her actions, and other potential victims are warned." Near the end of the evening, a young couple approached me with tears in their eyes. The woman introduced herself as Karen Williams and her husband as Mike. "Mrs. Patterson, we had to thank you in person. We saw your story online, and it gave my husband the courage to leave his cheating wife. Your example showed us that sometimes public truth is the only way to break free from private lies." Stories like theirs had become common over the past months. My wedding confrontation had inspired dozens of people to take control of their own situations instead of suffering in silence. I had received emails from around the country from people who said my courage had given them strength to face their own difficult truths. As the last guests departed and I locked the gallery doors, I reflected on the incredible journey from that devastating discovery 6 months ago to this moment of triumph. The woman who had been betrayed and humiliated at her son's wedding was gone, replaced by someone stronger, wiser, and more authentically herself. My phone buzzed with a text from David. "Mom, Sarah and I are so proud of you. You've turned something terrible into something beautiful. See you tomorrow for brunch at our place." Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities. The gallery was thriving. My relationship with my son was stronger than ever, and I had a freedom I had never experienced before. At 65, Nancy Patterson was finally living her own life on her own terms. 1 year after the wedding that changed everything, I stood before a packed auditorium at UC San Diego, delivering the closing keynote address at the Women's Empowerment Through Financial Independence Conference. The invitation to speak had come from Dr. Sarah Patterson, my daughter-in-law, who had organized the event as part of her residency program's Community Outreach Initiative. "Ladies," I began, looking out at the audience of women ranging from college students to retirees. "A year ago, I was a 65-year-old wife who defined herself through her husband's success and her son's achievements. Today, I'm a successful business owner, a survivor of financial fraud, and living proof that it's never too late to reclaim your power." The audience was captivating. My story had evolved from a personal drama into a case study of financial recovery and personal empowerment. The gallery was now profitable beyond my wildest dreams, featuring monthly exhibitions and educational workshops for aspiring artists. More importantly, I had established the Nancy Patterson Foundation for Women's Financial Independence, using a portion of my divorce settlement to help other women escape financially abusive relationships. After my presentation, during the question and answer session, a young woman in the back row raised her hand. "Mrs. Patterson, do you ever see your ex-husband? Do you know what happened to him?" It was a question I received frequently, and I always answered honestly. Robert Patterson is living in a small apartment in Chula Vista, working as a junior real estate agent. He lost his business, his reputation, and most of his assets due to his choices. I don't see him regularly, but I occasionally hear updates through our son. What I didn't mention was that Robert had attempted to contact me several times over the past year, once through David, once through a mutual friend, and once by showing up at the gallery. Each time he had claimed he wanted to make amends or explain his side of the story. Each time I had declined to engage. The Nancy Patterson who might have been curious about his explanations or motivated by sympathy for his downfall no longer existed. What about Victoria Sterling? Victoria served her jail sentence and was last seen in Las Vegas, where she was reportedly attempting the same predatory patterns with new victims. Some people never learn from consequences. They simply look for new opportunities to repeat their harmful behavior. After the conference, David, Sarah, and I had dinner at a beautiful restaurant overlooking Mission Bay. The conversation inevitably turned to the anniversary of the wedding disaster. "Mom," David said, "I need to tell you something I've never said before. Thank you for what you did at our wedding." I was surprised. "David, I ruined your wedding day. I turned your celebration into a public spectacle." "No, Mom. You gave Sarah and me the gift of truth. You showed us what real strength looks like. You taught us that marriage should be built on honesty, not comfortable lies." Sarah nodded emphatically. "When we have children someday, they're going to grow up hearing the story of their grandmother who refused to be a victim. That's a powerful legacy." Their words meant more to me than all the business success and financial security I had achieved. My actions hadn't just saved my own future, they had strengthened my family's foundation for generations to come. As we were leaving the restaurant, a woman approached our table hesitantly. "Excuse me, are you Nancy Patterson, the woman from the wedding video?" I smiled and nodded. The viral video had brought me a brief period of internet fame that I had initially found embarrassing, but had learned to leverage for positive purposes. "I wanted to thank you," the woman continued. "I was in a similar situation with my husband's affair, and watching your video gave me the courage to hire a private investigator. I discovered my husband had been stealing from our joint accounts for 3 years. Because of your example, I was able to protect myself financially before filing for divorce." Stories like hers had become common, and each one reinforced my belief that sometimes public truth-telling serves a greater purpose than private dignity. Later that evening, as I sat in my beautifully appointed home office, Robert's former space, which I had converted into my personal sanctuary, I reviewed the Foundation's first annual report. In just 6 months since its establishment, we had helped 47 women escape financially abusive relationships, providing legal assistance, financial counseling, and temporary housing support. The total amount of assets we had helped women recover exceeded $2.3 million. My personal financial recovery had been remarkable as well. The gallery's success, combined with my divorce settlement and speaking fees, had made me considerably wealthier than I had ever been during my marriage. More importantly, every dollar was mine to control, invest, or donate as I saw fit. My phone rang, interrupting my reflection. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Jessica Martinez from San Francisco. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I got your number from the Foundation website. I'm facing a situation similar to what you went through, and I desperately need advice." I spent the next hour talking Jessica through her discovery of her husband's affair and financial deception, providing her with resources and encouragement. These calls had become a regular part of my life, and I had developed a network of attorneys, investigators, and counselors who specialized in helping women in similar situations. As I prepared for bed that night, I looked at the phoenix ornament that David and Sarah had brought me from Italy, the one that now sat prominently on my desk as a reminder of my transformation. Next to it was a framed photograph from the gallery's opening night, showing me surrounded by friends, family, and supporters. The contrast with the woman I had been a year ago was striking. That Nancy had been financially dependent, emotionally diminished, and living a lie. This Nancy was independent, empowered, and completely authentic. My final act before sleep was to check my email, where I found a message that made me smile. It was from Linda Sterling, Victoria's sister, with an update I had been expecting. "Dear Mrs. Patterson, I wanted you to know that Victoria was arrested again in Las Vegas for fraud and identity theft. She's facing federal charges this time. Thank you for being the person who finally stopped her destructive pattern. Because of your courage, justice is finally being served." As I turned off the lights in my home, owned and controlled entirely by me, I felt a deep satisfaction that went beyond personal victory. My story had become bigger than my own recovery. It had become a cautionary tale about the dangers of financial deception, an inspiration for women facing similar challenges, and proof that it's never too late to fight for the life you deserve. If you've been inspired by my journey from victim to victor, I hope you'll take action in your own life where needed. Remember, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision that something else is more important than fear. For me, that something was truth, justice, and the determination to control my own destiny. Thank you for following my story. Please subscribe to our channel for more incredible true stories of triumph and transformation. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Your support means everything to me. And remember, it's never too late to write a new chapter in your own life story. Nancy Patterson's transformation was complete, but her impact was just beginning.